All right, Genius, welcome back. So let's talk about types of nodes in the DOM. Okay, we are actually going to take our time to explain this DOM, this whole thing about DOM because manipulating DOM, if you understand the DOM, it is going to help you a lot, especially when you start working with React and doing some interactive things with JavaScript and the web. Okay, so there are types of node, but first of all, what is a node? All right, what is a node? We want to take a look at types of nodes in the DOM, but what is exactly a node? So in the DOM, everything is a node. All right, everything is a node. Remember that the DOM is like a tree. All right, it's like a tree that the browser created out of the HTML. Okay, so a node is a single point in the document tree and represents parts of the document, such as elements, text, and comments. So a node is a single point in the document tree, and it represents parts of the document, such as elements, text, and comments. So when you have in your HTML page, you have elements, you have some text, you have some comments. All these things are going to form a node. All right. So the DOM defines a hierarchical tree structure. All right. The DOM is like it's a hierarchy. It looks like have a hierarchy structure where the document itself is the root node. All right. The document object, all right, is the root node. You'll be working with it a lot. Document dot get element by ID, whatever. You'll be working with this document object a lot. And the document itself. Now the document that the root node there is that HTML page, the HTML itself, okay, that's the document. Okay, so the document itself is the root node. All right, the document is the root node. Then other nodes are branches and leaves, including elements, attributes, and text. So you know that your HTML page starts with the HTML tag, and every other thing inside of it are nodes. So the document, now your HTML page is actually a document. Your SML document, your HTML document, these are documents, okay? So your HTML is actually a document. So that particular document, the document is actually, we have a node called a document. It is the root node. It is where every other node comes from, okay? So every other node can be branches and leaves, such as including elements, attributes, and text. So types of DOM nodes. There are 12 types defined in the DOM specification. All right. Now remember that DOM does not just only have to do with HTML, it also has to do with XML. All right. So there are 12 types of nodes defined in the DOM specification, but in practical usage, we mostly work with 5 of them. And then let's take a look at the common node type that we in practice. The first one is the element node. This element node represents an element, an HTML element, the div, the span, the H1, H2, any element at all. Okay, and there's a property there's a property called node type. So we are actually going to take this element node, these different types of nodes. We're actually going to have separate sessions for them so that we can have enough time to explain them. But for now, understand that the element node has it represents HTML tags, the div, the span, the URL, anything that's an HTML element represents the element node. And there's a property called the node type. If you want to, if when you're writing it in, when you're using JavaScript, if you want to get to know the node, the type of node you're working with, there's a property each and every one of them has that we call the node type. So the node type for an element is one. All right. So let's do some practical things here. All right. So see this HTML that we are working with. So I'm going to run it. Okay. I'm going to run it. Now we are here. All right. So let me try to get a document. So let me try to get a node. All right. Let me say constant H1 is equal to document dot get I can use get element by tag name, get elements by name, Okay, I can use query selector. Don't worry, we'll talk about all this, how to query, how to get this. So I can say query selector. We'll talk about this later on. And what I want to get H1. Okay, and when I get it, all right, I have it in H1. So if I say H1, all right, dot node type. All right, you can see there's a property called node type. If I say .node type, you see it gives me one. If I hit enter, it gives me one. So because this H1 is an element, so the node type of this element is one. So every element has a node type of one. All right. Every element has a node type of one. Div, H1, span, what as long as it's an element, it has a node type of one. So you can actually create a new element. Don't worry, we'll talk about how to work around with these things, creating elements. We have them in separate sessions so that we can have enough time to explain them. So now you can console log the node type, and the node type for all the element node is one. All right. So we also have the test node. Don't worry, we are going to discuss these things in later sessions and explain them in details. We have another node type called the test node. Now, this test node, the node type is three, and this thing represents any actual text inside an element. All right. When you any text that you have written inside an element is called a test node. All right. So the text that you have inside elements, they are called test node, and the node type is equal to three. So now we can create a test node. All right, don't worry, we are going to do this later on as you see how to create nodes, create elements, stuff like that, okay? And then the node type is three. So if I go to I want to do something here. Okay. If I say um okay, so if I say, look at it, if I say h1 dot test content, okay, let me save it somewhere. If I say const and I just call it test is equal to this, okay, and I hit enter. So if I say test, okay, dot, okay, so there's something I'm trying to actually do here, but it's okay. But look at what you can do. You can actually create a test node. All right, you can create, yeah, you can actually create a test node. What I was doing here was just to get a test of it, but this is not a test node. So you can actually create a test node. All right. So when we start taking a look at how to query the document, okay, we can actually do more of this. So you can actually create a test node. All right. And if you create a test node, you can append it to a child or something. So when we take a look at that, we'll talk about that in detail. So we have element node, we have test node. The node type of an element node is one, the node type of a test node is three. And you can actually create a test node, but we'll talk about that later on. So comment, we also have comment node because in your HTML page, you also write comment. So the node type for comments node is 8. All right. For element, the node type is 3. For test, for element, the node type is 1. For test, the node type is 3. For comment, the node type is 8. So you can actually still create comment using JavaScript, but we'll talk about how to create all these things. And later on, we are going to talk about each of these node type in details in their own sessions. So we also have the document node. Now the document node is like the parent node, and the node type is 9. We have element node, we have comment node, we have test node, and we have document node. Document node, the node type is 9. So it is the root of the DOM tree. That is where everything begins from. It is the root of the DOM tree, and it is typically accessed via the document. You see, it is actually accessed via the document. So if you want to access the root node, you can do something like this. You can say, you just type in the document, okay? You can see, as I get it highlighted, every other thing here, you see, if I take my mouse here, every other thing here gets highlighted because that is the root node. So if I do this dot node type, okay, you see, it gives us 9. So the node type of the document node is 9. The node type for element node is 1. Node type for text node is 3. Node type for comment node is 8. And node type for the document is 9. So we also have document fragment node, all right? This is used to, you use the document fragment node to temporarily manipulate the DOM. It is a temporary something, all right? So it is used as a lightweight container to manipulate DOM elements off screen. We'll talk about this in details. In each separate session, we discuss about it in details. That when you start learning React, there's something we also call fragment in React. And then when you understand this, you're going to understand that too. So the node type of this document fragment node is 11. So you can create a document fragment node using the create document fragment method, but don't worry, we'll talk about all these things later on. And the node type of this one is 11. Okay, so now we always have this confusion, a node and an element, all right? The thing is this, a node is everything. An element is a node, but a node might not be an element. Okay, look at it. Node is a generic term. It can be an element, text node, comment node. It can be document node. Do you understand? Okay, but an element is a specific type of node. An element is a node. A node can be an attribute node. It can be a comment node. It can be a text node. All right. It can also be an element node. So an element is a node. Why a node can be any other thing apart from element, aside element too. So it can be text node, it can be comment node, but an element is a specific type of node, and it is what you usually work with when manipulating HTML. So element is what we work with, the H1, the H2, the UL tag, the span tags, all the HTML tags. They are elements. We call them elements, okay? So an element can be a node, but a node can never be, a node can also be an element, or it can be a text node, it can be a comment node, okay? So look at this, um, okay, let me copy this. Let me copy this, okay, all right. Let me just borrow this code. Oops. Okay. So now I want to borrow this code. Let me put it here so that we can use it as an example. Okay, so here you see here we have a container, we have a test, we have a span, and we have a comment here. So we have different kinds of nodes here. So let's get back to our slide. Okay, so this results in the following nodes. Okay, look at it. We see this node, this example we have here, this div container, all right, we have some element node. Now, the first element node that we encounter here is the div container, is the div, all right? That's the first node that we encounter, okay? Then the second node that we encounter will be this hello. This hello will be a test node, all right? We'll have another element node because this span is also an element. So the span element is another element node. And after that, we get a comment node. But we also have the document node that encloses all of them, remember. All right. We also have the document node that encloses all of them. But in this small code snippet, okay, we have an element node, the div, first div, we have a test hello, we have another node span, we have comment, and that is it. Okay. So now these are the nodes. We also have a test. We have div node, the element node. We have another test node, hello. We have another element node, span. And we also have a test node. Remember, this span has some test. So this test is also a node. And finally, we now have a comment node. Okay. So let's take a look at the commonly used properties of the node. These properties are available on all node types, all right? They are not just elements, they are available on, remember, node types can be more than element node, okay? So now they are available on element node, they're available on document node. They are available on comment node, test node, okay? But how they behave depends on the type of node. All the properties we are going to be discussing now, all right, they are found in all the node types, but the way they behave depends on the node. So the first one is the node type, which you have seen. This, when you call this node type property, it returns the type of node as a number. Element is equal, 1 is equal to element, 3 is equal to test, etc. So the first one you have is the node type. You have seen me do it already. Okay, so if I go back to code, and here you can say document.node type, it gives you 9. All right, it gives you 9. So this is a property on a node. I can also say, now we have our, this thing have changed. So I can say, I want to look for, I want to get, I can say div is equal to document, oops, document dot, I can still use the query selector, and then I'll give it div. Now, of course, we only have one div in there, so it returns this div, and I'll say div dot node type. The node type here is 1 because this is an element. So the node type of this div is an element, is 1. All right. So we can also take a look at another type. All right. We can take another type is the node name. The node name will give you, because now remember every element I would actually have the node type as 1, but their name would vary because the node name for the node type for span, div, anchor tag, they are all 1. That's the node type. But the node name can be used to differentiate them. Okay, so it returns the tag name, uppercase for elements. It can also return test. It returns hash test, hash comment for test and for comments respectively. So if I go now and say, if I go back to the browser and I say div.node name, all right, it will return a div. It will return div. But if I, let me clear, if I try to, say const, I want to get the span. You know, we have a span there. You can say document.query. Don't worry, we're going to talk about the accessing elements later on. If I say document.span, get me the span. All right, we get the span. And if I say span dot node name, all right, you can see it gave me span. But this div and this span, they are all elements. So if I say, if I go for their node type, both of them will give me 1. But if I go for their node name, it will give me something different. Okay. So if I clear again, let me look for tests. If I say const, now if you try to do node type for, okay, let me do something. Oops. I'm trying to. If I try to do the node name for test, okay, let me just create constant. I will say, let me just call it test, and I will say is equal to document. Let me just create test node. All right, and this test node, I will call it hello. All right. Now I have created a test node. So if I go on and say test dot node name, you see, it will give us, look at what it will give us. It will go, when the node name for test nodes will give you hashtag test. It will give you hashtag test. The node name for comment will give you hashtag comments. Okay, you can also create a comment and try it. Okay, so node name for elements will give you the tag name. All right, node name for test will give you hashtag test. All right. We also have the node value. The node value, it is only for test and for no comment nodes. The test value for the elements will return null. So when you try to do node value on elements, it will give you null. All right. But if you try to do test dot node value, all right, it will give you the value that node, that test node contains, which is hello. But if I try to say div, all right, dot node value, it will give me null because it will give me null. Look at it, it gave me null. Remember, this div is the one that we have been using before. So when you try to do the node value on an element, it will give you null. But when you try to do the node value on a comment or a test node, it will give you the value that they contain. That's the test that they contain. All right. So child nodes. The child node will return all the children node of of an element. It return a node list of all child nodes, element test of a particular node. So if we go on and say now we have this div. Remember, we still have this div, and this div is the container that we have there. If I say dot child node, it will return an array of node lists. If I hit enter, it will give us, it gave us, yes, look at it, it gave us, it's telling us that it gave us all the children node, all right? It gave us all the node that are inside of this div. So we have the test, we have the span, we have the test, we have the comment, we have the test, remember, all right? Remember, so we have test, we have span, we have comment, and so all these things are nodes. Okay, so if you want to target the comment, I can go for the index is 3. So I can actually say, you can say the index, go for the index 3, and it will give me the comment. And if I say dot node value, it will give me the value. You can see it's giving me the value. It's showing me, if I do this, you see, it gave me the value of that comment. And if I try to say what is the node name, it will give me comment, a hashtag comment. Do you understand? So this is how you go around to work about it, okay? So when you try to do child node, it will give you all the children of an element that are nodes, all right? It will return all the node types under that particular node. This div is a node that we got. Remember how we got it? We did document or query selector, and we gave it string div, so that it gave us that this div container, and that's what we are working with here. So the child nodes will return a list of nodes, all the nodes that are contained in that. So the children, when you say instead of child node, if you say children, the children would only return child elements. Remember, child nodes will return all the nodes that are children of that element. But when you say children, it will return all the elements that are children of that node. Remember, there is a difference between node and element. So when we go on and say div.children, it will not include the text and the comment. Okay, it will not include them. It wouldn't include them. If I say children, you can see it only gave us, the only thing we have there is span, because span is the only element child. All right. So the other children are nodes. They are not elements. So the children will return all the elements children, while the child nodes will return all the element nodes. Okay. So if you expand this, you get the span, all right, as an element child there. Okay, sorry. So you can also do the first child, the last child. Okay, the first child will return what an element can be a parent. Remember this div container that we are working with now. Okay, look at this div container. All right, this div container, all right, is the parent of every other thing inside of it. This span container is the parent of this word. Okay, this body is the parent of every other thing inside of it. The HTML tag is the parent of the HTML tag is parent of the head and the body, while the head is the parent of every other thing in here. So now you can say, give me the first child. It is not hard. I'm going to leave it to do. I'm going to leave that to you. If I say div dot first child, all right, the first child. When you say first child, it is returning um, all the nodes. First child will refer to the first node child. not just the element. It will return the first node child. So if I go ahead and say, give me the first child, you see it returned a test node. All right, look at it. It returned a test node and the value is hello. But if I say div dot first element child, that's the difference. The first element child is going to return only the element, the first element child. Remember, the first child will return the first element, the first node child, while the first element child will return the first element, that is the child, the first child of the element that is an element. Okay, so the same thing with child nodes and children. First child will refer to the first node child, while first element child will refer to the first element child. So play around with these things. Okay. You also have last child. Okay, the last child will return the last child, the last node child. All right. So the first element child, the last element child will return the first or the last element child. There is a difference between node and element, okay? Don't get it confused. And if you get it confused, please reach out to me so that I can explain more, all right? So you can actually get the first element child. You can actually get the last element child. So if you want to get a parent node, all right, you can say div.parent node, all right? And it will give you whoever is the parent, all right? If I say div.parent node, parent node, not parent element. Parent node will give us any node at all. All right. If I say this, it gives us body. Remember, this our div is inside the body. But if I try div dot parent element, all right, it will still give us body because the body is also a node. All right. So that is the difference. So parent element will return the parent element node, while the parent node will return the parent node. All right. So play around with these things to understand the differences. Yeah, we have the parent element, which I just explained now. It returns the parent if it is an element, otherwise it will return null. All right, but this our div, the parent is the body, so that's why it didn't return null. But if the parent is not an element, it will return null. All right, so we also have next sibling, previous sibling. Now, this thing has to do with sibling means, now look at it, the div have some children. So all the children of that div, they are siblings to each other. So the next sibling, that means the next one following that particular element, the previous one is the one before. So I'm going to leave you to do some thinking here. All right, experiment with these things. This one will return, this next sibling, previous sibling will be returning node, any type of node. It can be a comment, it can be a text, it can be an element. So when you say node.next sibling, it will return the next, you know what a sibling is, and we have told you that we have parent node, we have children node, we have child node, and then the siblings are now the children of a particular node. So I want you to do some thinking here. So when you say node.next sibling, to give you the next sibling node, all right, or the previous sibling node. When you say next element sibling, to give you the next sibling that is an element. If the next sibling is not an element, it will return null. All right. So we also have the test content. The test content will return. This one has to do with test node. All right. You can use it to set or get the test inside of a node. Okay. So it has to do with comments or test node. So now we also have the inner HTML. The inner HTML will return, and now look at it. If we go ahead and say, if I say div.test content, all right, this is the content of the test content. It will return all the tests, all right, of this, all the test content of that div. If I try to say div.inner HTML, it will return, all right, it will return all the HTML, not just the text. It will return everything, all the elements. Look at it. This one is return all the elements, both text, comments, and elements, the inner HTML. So the text content will return just the text, all the text. all right? While the inner HTML will return all the HTML. So you can also change everything. You can also change the inner HTML here. So you can use this inner HTML to set or get the content of an element, all right? So outer HTML says or it gets or sets the element including itself. So when you say, look at it, when you say inner HTML, it is only returning the content of this HTML. But if I say outer HTML, it would also return itself. It will return, you can see now the div is included. You can see now the div is included. But when we did inner HTML, the div wasn't included. Look at the one on top. All right. The inner HTML didn't include the div, but the outer HTML also included the div and its content. So these are the things you can play around, and they are very, very useful when you start working with the DOM. Okay. So we also have owner document. It returns the top level document that owns this node. All right. So when you say the owner document, it might be giving you. So let's try and see what the div owner document will give us. It gives us the owner. So if I say div.owner document, now you can see the owner document here is the document object. Basically, most of the times it will be the document object. Okay. So thank you very much for taking this class. Make sure you do your assignment, make sure you do your test, and I will see you in the next session.